welcome to Property Question Time. This is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. My name's Stephen Galpin and with me today are Paul Mahoney. Welcome, Paul. You're founder and CEO of Nova Financial Group. Okay. Joining us all the way from France today, flown in specially, thank you very much, Johanna Leggett of Leggett Immobilier, based in France. Welcome. And John Howard. John, welcome back, a regular participant in our programme, property developer, author, and of course, Property TV Elevator Angel. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, the first question will go to Paul, and it's this. I'm considering entering the buy-to-let market. Am I better off looking at buying off-plan and waiting for delivery of the property, or buying something that's not new and may need refurbishment?
Okay, it's a fairly broad question in that there's a very broad scope of off-plan properties. There's also a very broad scope of refurbishment properties. I'd say the first thing to consider is how much of your time do you want to put into this? Off-plan is pretty well fully passive. You know, aside from the research you do in selecting the property, there's nothing you need to do thereafter from a hands-on perspective. Whereas, of course, with refurbishment, there is. I think a lot of people watch too many TV shows about refurbishment and assume it's really easy to create
and takes
equity.
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. You just turn over all this profit from refurbishing the property. Obviously, there's a broad scope of what refurbishing means as well. So the answer really depends on the person. I think what their skills are, what their goals are, what they've done in the past. Off-plan in the right circumstances can work really well, and I've seen it work really well for myself and others. In the right circumstances, but then there's also some very risky off-plan properties out there which you would really want to avoid. You need to understand the difference between those two things. And the same applies to refurbishment. It's not that easy to just go and make a fortune out of refurbishing properties, and you don't want to buy a lemon that you think you can turn into a diamond because you probably can't. And if you don't understand the difference between a lemon and a diamond in a rough, then you probably aren't going to do very well from that
Don't
either.
do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose you need to understand what your options are, what your skill set is, what your goals are, how much time you have to apply to that investment, and then make the decision that's best for you. There's definitely not one answer to that question, depending on this person's situation.
I suppose one of the other difficulties is that if you're buying off plan, you've got to anticipate what the rental market will be like at the point of completion of your
exactly.
property, which may be 1 or 2 years ahead.
That's exactly right. So I suppose if you're investing in an off-plan property, you need to have confidence in that location being in a better position, or at least the same position as when you're investing.
John, I'm guessing there that the advantage of buying off plan would be, my views on that, but I think that the advantage would be that you do have a new, clean, fresh property with which to let.
Yeah, you do. And I think, to be fair, Paul's done a great job in answering that question because it's a massive question. I have to say, buying off plan for a lot of people, I believe, is lazy property investing.
Okay.
Because it's very simple, obviously, very simple to do. You're following the crowd, you're following what everyone else is doing, and that is fine if you haven't got a lot of time spare, and also if you've done your research. Because, like you said, 18 months' time, do we know what the market's going to be like? Are there other developments in the area that are going to help this development that you're investing in get better and be worth more? It's very important to do your research. Just because you're buying off-plan, don't be a lazy investor. Still do the same amount of work, due diligence you do if you're buying something to refurbish yourself. Very important. The service charge on a block of flats, for instance, is vital to know what that is, and that it's genuine, and that it's not going to suddenly go up after the first year by 50% or something.
Well,
so do your research.
When you're buying from plan, that is usually the case, isn't it? The first 2 years are pretty low because
Can I just say, not on every development. Not on every development.
Not on yours.
I didn't say that. I just said not on every development.
Right, okay. Johanna, would the same criteria apply in France, perhaps?
Well, it's quite different in France with Brits buying in France because most of the off-plan that they're buying is for holiday homes, so it's not necessarily an investment. Although they will rent them out, generally speaking, most of the Brits we sell to are actually buying to use it as a holiday home themselves. And it would really depend because France isn't a huge country for making investment unless you're buying in cities. It's really a lifestyle choice to buy in France. It's quite different, I think, to the UK.
Different set of goals,
Yeah.
really. Okay, great stuff. Johanna, we're going to move on to you now for your first question. I've often thought about moving to an older style property in France, but I don't know how I would deal with the general issues that could crop up if I bought an older property. Things like mould, damp walls, insurance of utilities, even asbestos. I don't want to get into something I would regret, especially as I speak no French at all. Are there any safety measures I could rely on as an overseas buyer?
Well, first of all, I'd choose a very good agent that will help you through the process, of course. But France is quite a safe country to buy, and the French themselves don't actually do surveys when they're buying a property, but there are 5 standard tests that are done. One is for asbestos, so it checks to find out where the asbestos is. It doesn't necessarily mean you can withdraw from the sale if the property has asbestos, but it will highlight where it is. So if it needs to be removed, you're aware, because it might be in a chimney pot, it might be on an old barn roof or something like that. They also do an electrical test, so the electrics are all tested, and if there is any problems with it, it's highlighted before the purchase of the property, before the compromis de vente is actually signed, which is like the exchange of contracts. The sewage is also checked to see whether it conforms to the new regulations, because generally speaking, the older style properties are probably in the countryside and they're not, mains drains like we're used to. They also have a termites test, which will determine whether there's any termites. Termites is one reason that you can withdraw from a sale if the property does have termites, because that can be quite serious, although it can be treated. But it might just highlight that there's a bit of woodworm there that needs to be treated, etc. With the language barrier, don't worry. I mean, thousands of British people have been buying in France for centuries, and there's always help at hand. There are British surveyors that live in France that speak the language as well, that can help if you are worried about a property. They can come and they even do a two-hour walk-around service with you, completely different to what they do in the UK. But there's certainly lots of help at hand, and you are generally made aware of any problems before you have to sign anything. And also there'll be plenty of people at hand, including an agent, that will be able to help you for insurance and things like that as well.
So, Johanna, you mentioned the 5 various tests. Who is it that performs those tests? Is it some kind of local authority, or is it a commercial company that undertakes
They are
that?
commercial companies. They work in conjunction with the notaires. They're diagnostic tests, and so it's a diagnostic company that can perform those tests as such. They're obviously all legalised, and those tests are then sent to the notaire, who will go through them. They'll have a cover sheet that shows the conclusions of every single test, and that is actually part of the legal document that the notaire will draw up before the sale can go through.
Now, you mentioned just at one point, I think it was termites, where you said, well, that's an opportunity to withdraw from the sale. I mean, the situation in this country, as you well know, is that if you exchange contracts, then you're pretty well stuck in the contract. What's the point of no return under the sort of French system?
It's completely different. You can exchange contracts, say, within 3 or 4 days if all the diagnostic tests are in and that the notaire has them or the agent has them, because an agency in France can also draw up a compromis de vente. Then you have a 10-day cooling off period. So if you want to withdraw for any reason, you can do without any consequence. After the 10 days, you have to send your 10% deposit. Generally speaking, the termite test is only valid for 3 months. So if the sale goes on longer than 3 months, it has to be redone. And if the termites turn up suddenly or have just arrived with their suitcases, you can obviously withdraw from the sale just on the termites. But for any other reason, if you withdraw from the sale just because you decided 2 months down the line you don't want to buy it, you would be liable to lose your 10% deposit.
Okay, great. Thank you for that then, Johanna. John, your first question.
Yes.
There's a convenience store for sale in our village which comes with 2 stories of accommodation. Normally the owner would live above the shop, but I wouldn't want to do that. The village is near a commuter railway station, so I'm thinking of taking this shop and converting it into 2 apartments. As it's not more than 4 occupants, I think it's not something that would require HMO consent. But are there regulations I should be aware of when converting it?
Good question. The first thing is you want to make sure that it has a separate entrance to the shop, of course, because if it hasn't, you need to create that. That's obviously vitally important. It sounds like they need to get planning permission to convert the residential accommodation above two self-contained flats. And if they do have to do that, which I think they will do, that will come with all the fire precautions required and so on under the council permission. So apply for planning permission, get the planning permission, convert the properties correctly as to the planning permission, get the completion certificate from the local authority, and you're all set to go.
Okay, great. Paul, any difficulties with funding apartments above shops?
You know, lenders are always looking at anything that is going to deter a tenant from wanting to live there. So, you know, a typical one is a flat above a curry house. Yeah. You know, no one wants the smell of a curry house wafting through their apartment. Some people might, but most people wouldn't. So that is something that could raise issues. And I suppose if it was a convenience store, perhaps that's not a problem. But the risk is it could change into something else.
Well, also a convenience store could be open till 11 at night, which could be a problem, to be fair.
Yeah.
So the clue is in the word convenience, isn't it? Really. So it can be a problem, but Paul's absolutely right regarding, if you're looking to sell the flats above a shop, the first floor above a shop is always more difficult to sell for a number of reasons, one of them being the finance.
Yeah, and there's lenders that will do it, but there's lenders that won't.
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for in this half of the programme. Join us shortly after the break.
The antiquated village of La Roche-Becourt in rural Dordogne may not have the cachet of Paris or London, yet it houses one of the 10 fastest growing property consultancies in Europe. It is home to Leggett Immobilier, the leading international estate agent in France. They have around 16,000 properties for sale right across the country, with a network of 400 agents who provide local expertise and market knowledge. If you want to know the best villages, schools, restaurants or boulangeries, then the Leggett team will know the answer. As well as advising buyers on the local market and regional property prices, they also have a bilingual contract team who ensure that your purchase will go through as smoothly as possible. Leggett has been voted Best Estate Agent in France for the past 4 years running. To experience these exceptional service levels for yourself, then head to our website, leggettfrance.com.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialize in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial.
My name is John Howard, and I've been investing and developing properties for over 40 years. In that time, I've been very successful, but of course I've always made the odd mistake as well. In my book, I explain how to be successful and what to do should something go wrong. I've survived 3 property recessions. I can help you do the same. My book is available online. Please go to johnhowardpropertyexpert.co.uk.
Hello and welcome back to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and joining me are Paul Mahoney, Johanna Leggett and John Howard. Welcome back, guys. Paul, your second question. If I buy and let out a property purchased with a buy-to-let mortgage and my circumstances change, what are the financial consequences if I move into the property and make it my home?
Okay. Financial consequences. Well, there's a few things you need to do to be able to do that. You can't just go and live in it. That would be breaking the terms of the buy-to-let mortgage. Some people do that, and it's called a backdoor buy-to-let. The reason for that term is it's easier to get a buy-to-let mortgage than it is to get a residential mortgage. They're less regulated, and the serviceability is based upon the rent the property generates as opposed to your personal income. So when you buy a home, You know, it's all about the multiple of your income so far as how much you can borrow. Whereas when you go for a buy-to-let, it's all about the rent from the property. So of course, if you then move into that property and it's not generating any rent, then you're the only one servicing the mortgage. So some people try to do that, and lenders are quite onto it. You know, they look at things like how close the buy-to-let is to your work. If it's closer than your home and bigger than your home, they'll likely ask a lot of questions. But it doesn't seem like that's what this person's doing. But they do need to be careful. They can't just go and move into it. They do need to change the mortgage. At the very least, ask the lender's permission. They'll probably say no, and they'll probably make you remortgage the property either with them or a different lender onto a residential mortgage.
Right. Okay. And how strict would they be? I mean, you're talking about the two different levels of qualification for the mortgage, financial qualification, that is. So, what happens if you if you said to them, well, look, I'm a little bit strapped for cash. I can't run the two homes. I need to just cut down to one. Will they let you keep the same lending criteria as the buy-to-let if you're going to change it, or are they going to be really strict and
no, the criteria will change completely because because buy-to-let mortgages are considered commercial mortgages, so they're made on the basis that you're using them for the purposes of business, and there's some level of assumption that in doing that you kind of know what you're doing, and therefore they're slightly less regulated. Whereas with a residential mortgage, it's very much a consumer mortgage, and therefore there's higher levels of regulation applied to them. So, you know, just to answer the question simply, the consequences is if you went and did that without asking the lender would have the right to recall the mortgage on the spot. So that could be disastrous. So effectively, you would need to speak with the lender, tell them what you're planning to do, and the likely outcome is that they would tell you were going to need to remortgage that property to be able to move into it.
Same sort of thing in France, Johanna?
Probably exactly the same, yes. I mean, I can't advise on mortgages because we're obviously just selling, but I think it is exactly the same. Mm.
I can't believe all that.
You can't believe
I can't believe all that. I know it's true, but I mean, surely if someone's paying the mortgage and there's no problem with it, I can understand why you have to inform them, of course, you must do so, that you're moving into it. But would they really force you to refinance the whole project, or will they just charge you a higher interest rate, Paul? Because it seems a bit harsh to me.
But the issue is the lender would effectively be breaking the rules if they let you go and move into it.
No, I see
because
that,
they wouldn't have fulfilled all the legislative requirements to allow, you know, to give a residential mortgage on that property.
Now, how long would they give you to? I'm doing your job now.
It depends.
Sorry.
It really depends on the lender.
Yeah.
But you know I'm quite confident the lender would get in trouble if they allowed you to go and move into it as your primary place of residence.
And would they give you 6 months or something like that to refinance?
They might do. You know, I have come across quite a lot of people doing this.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, a lot of the time it's something you don't really want to hear because it's something you're supposed to report.
But, you know, I suppose this is, again, part of the government's reasoning for sort of trying to professionalise the letting market.
I agree totally. And it needs to be professionalised.
Yeah, it does.
Because, you know, we're all paying tax. Some of these people aren't paying tax on their rental, on their rents and their profit they're making by selling the property on. They're not paying tax, and they should be. So I think the government's doing the right thing.
Just one other comment on that question as well. I think this person's looking at it the wrong way. You know, if they're buying a buy-to-let, they shouldn't be buying that as a potential place they might have to move into in the future.
No.
Because that's probably not the best investment, but it's also not the right frame of mind. You know, that they obviously you want to account for downsides, but in my opinion, you should really be separating your investments from your personal life.
Well, Paul, I've listened to you on many programmes, and you've always been very clear that you have to approach this as a business, nothing else.
Definitely. Always, property is a business. End of. Whether you've got one property or 100, it's a business.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Johanna, I've recently developed an attraction to Central, that's coastal France, and I don't know, is coastal Central
France?
No,
it's not actually.
It's a bit of a contradiction,
right in the
really,
middle,
isn't it? Yeah, I was going to say. So let's go on.
But I'm presuming halfway down.
Let's
France
go on.
on
Let's
the
go on
coast.
coastal.
Yeah.
That's much more interesting. So I've developed an attraction for coastal France, and I'm considering investing in property there. Not too far south, but warmer than the UK. Are there any good places to consider right now? not too commercial, yet with the potential of providing a good yield?
Well, I'm presuming that the person isn't going to be using it themselves, but then saying that if they're looking at halfway down France, quite warm and stuff, it sounds like they might want to use it as a holiday home themselves. In those instances, if it's going to be just for investment and you're just going to rent it out, then I would go for towns like university towns, etc., La Rochelle, Vannes, for example, where you will get yield all year round, and the yield's probably in those areas around 6%. If you're looking for holiday yields or whatever, it can be slightly higher, but again, I would choose the big touristy towns. Halfway down, you're probably looking from southern Brittany, which has the Gulf Stream, so you get really lovely warm weather, all the way down to sort of the Nouvelle-Aquitaine. Some really good islands are Ile-de-Laurent and Ile-de-Ré, which are quite expensive, but they do provide a lot of, provide high yields because you've got a lot of Parisians renting there, a lot of Bordelais, people coming from Bordeaux to rent holiday homes there. But the season can only generally run between April and September, so it's not huge, but they are quite high rentals in those seasons.
I mean, interestingly enough, there's two contradictions in that question, isn't there, really? One is the central and the coastal, and the other one, of course, they're talking about investment high yields, and yet they're saying, well, I've got an attraction for, and I think, as we said in an earlier question, it should be a business, whether it's here or in France. So
exactly.
You have to take a cold clinical decision, don't you? It's either going to be nice for you or it's going to be good for your tenants.
I've got some information about La Rochelle, if I may just share that with you, because I cycled there, and from Ipswich it's 498 miles.
Right.
Lovely place, by the way.
It is actually,
Lovely
yes,
place.
it is actually.
Is that information or is that showing off?
No,
That's just information.
Well, the other thing
that was yesterday, was it?
No, it was last year.
I think as well with towns like La Rochelle, for example, you do have all the cheap airlines flying into there as well. So
Yeah,
for
that wasn't the
Brits
reason
from a
we went there, of
holiday,
course.
well, you cycled.
Yeah, we
obviously,
flew
yeah.
back.
But it is, so it is very, very popular with British. Again, Vannes is very cosmopolitan because you have the yacht race starting from there, etc., in southern Brittany. So they're all very popular areas and very, very easy to rent out.
Okay, great stuff. Well, John, thank you for sharing that with
I
us.
just thought I would mention it.
We'll now move on to your question.
Very good.
I'm not really sure what the best choice is for my wife and I. We're aiming to get on the housing ladder, albeit a bit late in life. Well, as my wife is now 30 and I'm in my early 40s, I know that's too late, is it? It's quite normal these days. We've one child and another one on the way. House prices are very high where we live, so help to buy or shared ownership appears to be the only realistic option for us. For the size of property we need, the mortgage is affordable, but needs somehow to raise a good deposit. We can't temporarily move in with our parents. We don't have any inheritance or anything like that. So are there any other ways of us financing the deposit to open the door for us?
Well, this is quite a common problem for a lot of people, and what I would say, don't be over ambitious, really. They say they live in an expensive area. Well, with all due respect, you may want to move slightly further out from where you are into a slightly cheaper area. Don't make life so hard for yourself that you'll never do it. That's the first thing to do. The second thing I think is they say they haven't got any family who can help at all with the deposit. Is that what they're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, and that is obviously a problem. So I would go to some housing associations, see what schemes there are available for shared ownership where perhaps you're not putting a deposit in initially and that you can buy more of the property as the years progress. But to be honest with you, Paul is probably might have one or two ideas on this as well.
Okay, but just before I go to Paul
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
I know, John, that you're quite a fan of government help to buy schemes,
Yes.
aren't you?
Yes.
I've always been rather sceptical.
You have,
Do
yes.
you want to just spell out very quickly and simply how they work and how they might help these people?
Okay. Well, the Help to Buy scheme is a wonderful scheme brought in by the UK government where they've made £10 billion available for first-time buyers. And obviously with first-time buyers, there's also now no stamp duty, which is another great thing. So they've made 10 billion available, and depending where you are in the area, depending how much deposit they will give. In London, they will put up a 40% deposit, which you don't have to pay any interest on or anything for 5 years. So it depends where you are in the country. It varies how much deposit they will allow you to put. You'd normally got to find 5% yourself. But as I said, to be honest with you,
but there you are, you see, I've always said move to London. Paul, what have you got to add?
John took the words out of my mouth. Help to Buy is a great scheme for first-time buyers. One of the guys in our office has just used it. He's bought a £500,000 property in London with a £25,000 deposit. The stamp duty is only waived by the government up to 300 grand,
yes,
but the developer paid the 15 grand over and above that.
Right. Okay.
So literally 25,000. Usually he would have had to have 50 plus stamp duty. So that's what, 70 odd thousand, 75,000 would have had to be in the deposit in the past. Now it's 25. He can afford that £275,000 mortgage that he's taken on. And he's got 5 years of the interest-only equity loan, or 10 years with a little bit of interest added on for the final 5. So, that's helped that person, which probably would have really struggled to save the 75, to get into the market and to work toward, owning that property outright.
Okay. Great. Well, that's all we've got time for today. So thank you all very much. Paul Mahoney, thank you. Johanna Leggett, thank you. And John Howard, many thanks to you too. Join us again next time on Property Question Time.
If you have any questions you'd like to send to the experts at Property Question Time, you can submit them via our website, on social media, or email us on info@propertytelevision.co.uk.
The antiquated village of La Roche-Beaucourt in rural Dordogne may not have the cachet of Paris or London, yet it houses one of the 10 fastest growing property consultancies in Europe. It is home to Leggett Immobilier, the leading international estate agent in France. They have around 16,000 properties for sale right across the country, with a network of 400 agents who provide local expertise and market knowledge. If you want to know the best villages, schools, restaurants or boulangeries, then the Leggett team will know the answer. As well as advising buyers on the local market and regional property prices, they also have a bilingual contracts team who ensure that your purchase will go through as smoothly as possible. Leggett has been voted Best Estate Agent in France for the past 4 years running. To experience these exceptional service levels for yourself, then head to our website, leggettfrance.com.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialise in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial.
Hi, I'm John Howard and I'm known as the property expert. The reason for this is over the last 40 odd years, I've bought and sold over 3,500 properties and I'm still going. I'm delighted to pass on my vast experience and knowledge to you through my property seminars that are taking place across the UK this year. To know more, please go to johnhowardpropertyexpert.co.uk.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you're receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax-efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex Simple.